Something terrifying is happening, and no one's talking about it. People aren't just tired. They're done. Done trying. Done dreaming. Done feeling. The U.S. just hit a record. Over 62% of Americans say they've lost all motivation. Prescription antidepressant use? At an all-time high one, 4 women in their 40s and 50s are on them. And yet, no one's asking why. We used to live. Now we just exist. This isn't a recession of money, it's a recession of the soul. And if you've been feeling like you don't care anymore, like everything feels numb, you're not broken. America is. And in this video, I'm going to show you why. We don't even daydream anymore. You ever notice how quiet your mind is lately? Not the good kind of quiet either. Not the peaceful, meditative stillness people crave. I'm talking about the empty kind, the what's the point kind. The kind where you realize you haven't daydreamed in months. Not about that trip you swore you'd take. Not about writing the book. Not about starting that garden or learning how to play the guitar or falling in love. Nothing. Because let's be honest, what are we even looking forward to anymore? Rent's up. Groceries are up 30% since 2019. Insurance premiums are breaking records. Student loan debt hit $1.77 trillion in 2023. And even if you're not paying one, someone you love is suffocating under it. We're too busy surviving to be dreaming. We've been programmed to grind, hustle, optimize. You can't even scroll Instagram without being told you're wasting time unless you're making money. But let me tell you something most people don't admit out loud. Burnout doesn't always come with fire. Sometimes it's just a slow leak. It's when you realize you haven't felt excited in a long time. Not for birthdays, not for holidays, not even for weekends. We traded hope for productivity, traded meaning for metrics. We got sold this lie that life is just a to-do list. Now people stare at screens all day and call it living. AI is automating everything, and instead of that freeing us, it's terrifying us. Because deep down, we know we've been replaced before we even got a chance to matter. The future used to be a blank canvas. Now it just feels like a checklist of crises. Climate, war, economy, elections, tech dystopia, rinse and repeat. That's why people aren't interested in anything anymore. It's not laziness, it's erosion. The slow disappearance of possibility, of wonder, of what if. And if you haven't noticed that in yourself yet, ask when's the last time you looked out a window and let your mind wander without guilt. We don't daydream anymore because we've been convinced there's no room for dreams in a world that demands constant output. But if we don't take that back, if we don't reclaim some space in our heads, just to imagine we're not just losing interest in life, we're losing the capacity to be alive. Everything has become background noise. When was the last time anything truly moved you? Like, not just distracted you, but really shook you awake? Because we're so overstimulated now, nothing cuts through the noise anymore. A wildfire takes out 2 million acres? We scroll past it. A mass shooting? Tragic, but we've already seen 3 this week. Politicians lie on camera, and we just sigh. We've become so emotionally saturated that we don't even react. It's not apathy, it's psychic exhaustion. And here's the kicker. The more plugged in we are, the more numb we become. We're consuming 34 gigabytes of content a day on average. That's like binge-watching Netflix for 12 hours, every single day. And it's not just passive every swipe. Every headline triggers micro-stress. The cortisol builds. The dopamine flatlines. Our brains are so fried that even pleasure feels like work. Ever notice how people don't laugh as much in public anymore? How concerts are quieter, clubs emptier, churches echo more? It's because everything is starting to feel like noise. Songs don't hit. Movies feel recycled. Conversations feel like reruns. And nobody's really listening, just waiting for their turn to speak. It's like we're all broadcasting, but nobody's tuned in. And that's why people are checking out. Not because they're lazy or antisocial, but because the signal-to-noise ratio in life has collapsed. Even happiness feels like a marketing ploy now. Buy this. Click that. Manifest abundance. Whatever happened to just being? Now we need a podcast, a planner, a pill, and a productivity app just to feel something. And the scariest part? We're starting to accept it, starting to normalize the numbness. But it's not normal. Not reacting to tragedy isn't normal. Not being able to focus for more than 30 seconds isn't normal. Feeling empty after 6 hours of TikTok isn't normal. But we cope because breaking down would mean admitting how broken everything else is. So we drown it out with more noise. We multitask our way to nowhere. We survive, but we don't live. And that's how interest dies, not with a bang, but with an endless, meaningless scroll. The system made passion pointless. You know what nobody talks about anymore? Passion. Like actual, real, visceral excitement for something. Whether it was art, music, teaching, starting a business, helping people, whatever it was that made you feel alive. Because now, that passion has to pay rent. And if it doesn't, it gets buried. Remember when we used to do things just because we loved them? Not for clicks, not for followers, not to monetize, just for the joy of it. That's gone. People are losing interest in their passions because capitalism turned everything into content. Every hobby has to be a hustle. Every talent has to be a side gig. And if it doesn't generate income, it's a waste of time. We're not living in a society that values creativity. We're living in one that exploits it. The art world? Controlled by ultra-wealthy gatekeepers. Music? Dominated by algorithm playlists and AI-written tracks. Even therapy and wellness spaces have been commodified. Self-care now costs $299 and comes in a branded box. And let's not even start on how education crushed curiosity. American schools have turned into testing factories. College graduates are leaving school with $37,000 in average student loan debt, only to enter a job market that treats them like disposable code monkeys. Gen Z is the most educated generation in history and the most disillusioned. Because passion doesn't pay student loans. Passion doesn't come with health benefits. Passion doesn't give you a 401k. That's why people gave up. It's not because they stopped loving what they do. It's because the system convinced them their love wasn't worth anything unless it was profitable. And deep down, people are grieving. They're grieving the parts of themselves they had to bury to survive. The dancer who doesn't dance anymore. The writer who doesn't write. The kid who used to draw galaxies in the margins of his notebook and now just stares blankly at spreadsheets. That's not laziness. That's systemic theft. We were robbed of meaning. Robbed of joy. And the cruel irony? Most people don't even realize it happened because they were too busy working 2 jobs, chasing likes, or trying not to drown in medical debt. Passion didn't die, it was evicted. Friendships are becoming transactional, and nobody wants to admit it. Let's be real about something that nobody has the guts to talk about anymore. Friendship feels like a subscription service now. People used to form bonds over time, over shared memories, over silly jokes that turned into traditions. Now it's networking. It's who can help me level up. It's what do you bring to the table, as if basic human connection has to be earned. You ever text someone and feel like you're scheduling a business meeting? Like you're slotting in a coffee catch-up between 2 emails, and the whole thing feels like a LinkedIn update disguised as a conversation? Yeah, that's not friendship. That's survival mode socializing. And people are quietly opting out of it. Loneliness in the US has tripled since 2019. And it's not because we're antisocial, it's because connection got hijacked by hustle culture. You say you're tired, and people respond with productivity hacks. You express sadness, and someone tells you to just go to the gym. We've been conditioned to optimize each other. And somewhere along the way, vulnerability became a liability. People ghost not because they're evil, but because they're empty. They're drained, overstimulated, emotionally maxed out. Even social media, which used to help us stay connected, has warped friendships into performance. Your friends are now your audience, your followers, your likes. And you feel guilty when you don't engage with them, even though you're too exhausted to be present for yourself. And so people retreat. They stop reaching out. They cancel plans with, sorry, just so overwhelmed right now. And nobody gets mad because we all understand. We're all overwhelmed. And that's the saddest part, this mutual agreement that we're too drained for each other. Half of millennials say they don't have a best friend. Gen Z, even worse. A staggering 61% say they feel serious loneliness on a regular basis. This isn't just a social issue, it's a health crisis. Studies now show that loneliness is as deadly as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And still, we pretend we're okay. We scroll past real cries for help and double-tap selfies. So, yeah, people are losing interest in friendships. Not because they don't want love, but because love now feels like work. And when everything feels like work, even connection becomes a chore. And that's when we start shutting down. Our attention spans have been engineered to collapse. You know something's wrong when you can't finish a 2-minute video without checking your phone again. You're watching something and still feel the need to multitask. That's not just a bad habit. That's neurochemical sabotage. Tech companies, those same ones that swore to connect us, spent billions designing algorithms that literally hijack your brain. They studied dopamine like it was a drug, because it is. And now you're hooked. Not just to content, but to constant input. Our brains weren't built to process a never-ending stream of crisis, drama, gossip, politics, ads, and viral memes all at once. And yet, that's exactly what we do. The average person touches their phone 2,617 times a day. You're not lazy. You're overstimulated. You're malfunctioning from too much information. And that's why people are losing interest in everything. Because when you've been trained to swipe after 8 seconds, how are you supposed to focus long enough to care? Even hobbies don't feel fun anymore. You start painting, and after 5 minutes, your hand reaches for your phone. You try to read a book, and your mind wanders every other paragraph. You try to meditate, and suddenly you're spiraling about work emails and celebrity gossip at the same time. The worst part? We blame ourselves. We say, I just can't focus, like we're broken. But we're not broken. We've been programmed to scatter. And attention isn't just about productivity. It's the foundation of meaning. If you can't focus, you can't reflect. If you can't reflect, you can't grow. If you can't grow, you can't care deeply. And if you can't care deeply, then nothing matters. And that's what's happening on a mass scale. We are entering a post-attention era, where depth is dying, where conversations are shallow, where news is skimmed, not understood, where politics is a meme war, and religion is an Instagram quote. And you think, why does nothing feel real anymore? That's why. You can't form a connection with anything when your brain is trained to move on before it has time to process. And here's the part that nobody wants to say out loud. Attention span isn't just a personal issue, it's a civilization issue. If we can't sustain attention, we can't build, we can't solve, we can't evolve. That's not just loss of interest. That's the collapse of consciousness. The future feels like a threat, not a promise. There used to be this unspoken agreement. Even if things were hard now, the future would be better. That was the trade-off. You grind today so you can rest tomorrow. Go to school, get the degree, get the job, buy the house. But what happens when that promise gets broken in front of your eyes? Because that's what's happening now. For millions of Americans, especially the young, the future doesn't feel like a reward anymore. It feels like a trap. A booby-trapped hallway leading to nowhere. Just more debt, more rent hikes, more inflation, more automation, more surveillance, more loneliness. We're told to work hard for a future that keeps pulling away like a mirage. Homeownership? Out of reach. As of 2024, the median home price in the U.S. hit $412,000, while wages remained stagnant for 70% of Americans. Healthcare? A nightmare. The average ER visit now costs $2,600 to $3,000 without insurance. Retirement? LOL. Over 40% of Americans aged 55 plus have zero savings for retirement. College degrees don't mean security anymore. Marriage doesn't mean stability. And technology doesn't mean freedom. It means being tracked, rated, and optimized until you're just data in someone else's portfolio. That's why people aren't planning long-term anymore. That's why people aren't having kids. That's why people aren't saving for the future. Because deep down, they don't believe it's coming. Or worse, they believe it's coming, but it's hostile. And that changes everything. You stop investing in yourself. You stop building. You stop dreaming. And that's exactly how you kill a civilization, by removing hope one layer at a time. Because without hope, people don't rebel. They resign. They stop asking for more. They start accepting less. And that's what we're seeing now. People clock in, clock out, zone out, burn out. And it's not because they're lazy. It's because the future no longer offers them a reason to try. And when the future stops feeling like a place you want to live, the present becomes a prison. Nothing feels sacred anymore. Once upon a time, there were things in life that felt sacred. Places, rituals, relationships, things that were bigger than money, bigger than metrics, things that made us feel human. But now, nothing feels sacred. Weddings have become Instagram photo shoots. Churches compete on social media for engagement metrics. Funerals are live-streamed and shortened to accommodate work schedules. Even childbirth, literally creating life, is reduced to gender reveals and baby brand sponsorships. The sacred has been sold off in pieces, bit by bit. Because capitalism doesn't just sell you products, it sells you your own soul, and then rents it back to you at 20% APR. And you feel it, don't you? That weird emptiness that creeps in during holidays, when everything is supposed to feel special, but instead feels hollow. You're eating the meal, smiling for the photo, and inside, you're wondering why it doesn't feel like it used to. It's because the moment has been monetized. It's not about presence anymore. It's about presentation. Not about meaning, but about optics. Even spirituality has been corporatized. Meditation apps with premium tiers, healing crystals mass-produced in factories, self-help gurus charging $499 for a weekend of alignment. And the worst part is we're not even mad about it anymore. We're numb. We expect it. We scroll past news of genocide the same way we scroll past lunch recipes. Because when everything is broadcasted, nothing is sacred. Not life, not death, not even truth. AI can fake a voice. Deepfakes can fabricate a memory. History can be rewritten in real time with a few well-placed search algorithm tweaks. And when the lines between real and fake blur beyond recognition, people check out. They stop caring. Because why care about anything when everything feels like a lie wrapped in pixels? So we live in this weird twilight zone where we know something's wrong, but we can't put our finger on it. It's because we've lost the sacred, the untouchable, the things that grounded us in mystery and awe. And until we find a way to make something sacred again, whether it's a moment, a community, a belief, we're going to keep drifting, disinterested, disillusioned, and disconnected. The American dream turned into a nightmare. Nobody wants to wake up in. Remember when the American dream meant something? Not just a slogan, but an actual path. Work hard, buy a home, raise a family, retire with dignity. That was the promise. Now it's a rigged game with no exit. Let's stop pretending. The American dream is dead, and worse, it's been weaponized. Used to guilt-trip people into staying on a treadmill that leads absolutely nowhere. And you feel it every time you wake up to that alarm clock and think, this can't be my life. But you go anyway, because the bills don't care about your burnout. The landlord doesn't care about your dreams. And your boss, they care about numbers, KPIs metrics, output. Not you, not your soul, just the machine. And this is where it gets really dark, because people didn't just lose interest in achieving the American dream. They lost interest in believing in it. And that's dangerous. Because when you strip a society of hope, you don't get rebellion, you get resignation. You get people who still go to work, but stare blankly at the wall when they get home. You get families that eat in silence. You get teenagers who look at adulthood not with excitement, but with dread. Over 70% of Americans now say the US is on the wrong track. Only 36% of Gen Z believe the American dream is even possible for them. And they're right to question it, because the cost of living has outpaced wage growth for 23 straight years. You can work 60 hours a week and still not afford rent in most US cities. The average rent for a one-bedroom apartment is over $1,700. That's before utilities, food, gas, or health care. So people retreat, not because they're lazy, but because they're tired of playing a game that's clearly rigged. And the worst part, they're being gaslit for it. Told they're entitled or ungrateful or not trying hard enough. But maybe it's not the people who are broken. Maybe it's the dream that's a lie. And if that's the case, what are we even striving for anymore? People can't even feel joy without guilt anymore. We've gotten to a place where even joy feels suspicious. You finally take a break, and there's a voice in your head whispering, you should be doing something productive. You laugh too hard, and you remember the war, the layoffs, the bills you haven't paid. You enjoy a moment of peace, and you feel like you're cheating. That's not just anxiety. That's emotional conditioning. We've been trained to associate peace with irresponsibility, joy with selfishness, rest with laziness. So even when good things happen, we flinch. We wait for the catch. We expect the crash. And it's robbing people of the ability to feel anything without strings attached. Because, let's be honest, the world is falling apart. Climate collapse, rising fascism, economic precarity, mass mental health crises. So when something good happens, it feels like you're dancing on a grave. But that constant guilt, that's emotional surveillance capitalism. They've hijacked our feelings now. They want you anxious. They want you numb. Because anxious people buy more. Numb people work harder. They don't protest. They don't organize. They just cope. And that's why people are losing interest in joy. It's been rebranded as luxury, a spa day, a $19 smoothie, a treat-yourself purchase. But real joy? The kind that comes from purpose, from community, from living authentically? That kind of joy has been buried under 10 layers of debt, doom scrolling, and fake positivity. We laugh, but only when it's safe. We dance, but only in private. We smile, but it feels like a mask. And that's what's terrifying. Because when people can no longer access joy, they lose the will to fight. Not fight with violence, but with hope, with creativity, with resilience. That's the deeper cost of modern life. Not just lost money or time, but lost emotional freedom. And unless we reclaim that, unless we start defending joy as something sacred, we're going to keep spiraling into numbness. Because a world without guiltless joy is not a world worth waking up in. We've quietly accepted a life that feels like death. We are alive, but barely living, functioning, walking, talking, breathing. But on the inside, something's gone quiet. And I'm not talking about sadness or even depression. I'm talking about something deeper, the spiritual stillness of a soul that's done hoping. You ever wake up and feel like you're just continuing a story you didn't write? Like you're playing a role someone else cast you in, reading lines off a script that doesn't make sense anymore? That's what this country has become. A theater of routine where everybody's acting like they're okay when they're not. And the scariest part? We've adjusted. We've normalized a life without beauty, without awe, without spontaneity. We go to work, we come home, we watch TV, we sleep. Repeat. 56% of Americans say they're just getting by. Only 1 in 3 say they feel engaged in their own lives. And those are just the ones willing to admit it. Millions more are floating through existence like ghosts in their own bodies. Still smiling in photos, still showing up to family dinners. But inside, they're miles away. And that, right there, is how the system wins. Not through force, not through violence, but through compliance, born from exhaustion. It doesn't need to crush you. It just needs you tired enough to stop asking questions. And that's where we are. We've confused survival with living. We've mistaken silence for peace. We've replaced meaning with routine, and we wonder why nothing feels real. People are losing interest in everything because life has stopped feeling like something you experience and started feeling like something you endure. And until we look that reality in the face, until we stop pretending that everything is fine, we're just going to keep existing, not living, just existing. But it doesn't have to stay this way, because even a flicker of awareness of truth can ignite a fire. And maybe, just maybe, if we say it out loud, if we name it, if we stop pretending, then we can start remembering what it felt like to care, to wonder, to be alive.